I was 13 when I became part of the system.
I was a troubled kid from the beginning. I was from like age 5, I was getting suspended.
The way I got started in the juvenile system was from running away. I was running away from an abusive home and I ended up getting locked up.
Hi everybody, my name is Scott Larson with the Institute for Juvenile Justice Ministries, and I want to welcome you to this next training, which is on race, racism, and cultural competency. You might wonder, well, what's a white male doing talking about race and cultural competency around juvenile justice ministry? The issue of cultural competency, race, racism is generally pretty well understood by those who are non-white. It's mostly a white issue and often requires a white person to address it to other white people. Now, I know everybody who's watching this is not going to be white and male, but I'm speaking primarily to that audience. There are different environments and different parts of our whole selves. So one is race, one is gender, one is socioeconomic background, and there are others as well. However, somebody who's not white, male, heterosexual, socioeconomically middle class, Protestant Christian, they read those things in a very blatant way, and as does our culture. Those in the juvenile justice system are primarily non-white, and those people who are of color who go in and minister to these young people have a pretty good understanding of what it is to grow up in our society and be non-white. So the area I want to discuss first is the whole area of white privilege. And I know this is a lightning rod for probably all of us, even that term, but it's an important one to address. Recently, I was asked to speak at a Christian high school, and I talked on the topic of white privilege, my own experience of it. That's what I was asked to talk about. But at the end of that day, the school administrators received 52 emails from angry parents. And so the objections that I received from that Christian high school or that parents set in were all around 3 or 4 things. The first one, are you saying that we got where we are because we're white, that we didn't work for it? And no, that's not what I'm saying at all. White privilege doesn't assume that somebody just automatically is given a nice car or a good job. What it does say is that the starting line for everybody is not the same, and that in our culture, to be white and incidentally to be male as well, and middle class and all kinds of things that I carry as a privilege, gives me a different starting point. But privilege just says that I may get a head start over other people. The second objection around this issue of white privilege was, hey, it sounds like you're calling me a racist. And for those of us who are white, we tend to hear this conversation more individually, like, you're saying I'm a racist, but I have all kinds of friends who aren't white, so why are you saying I'm a racist? I have nothing against them. And yet people of color tend to hear this conversation more systemically. And that even is a bigger blind spot for me, because the system is not clear to me how my whiteness gives me a leg up. But to those who are not white, they understand systemic racism really clearly. And there's no place that shows up greater than in the justice system and also in the juvenile justice system.
What is really discouraging to me all the time is when I walk into a courtroom and all my attorneys are white, males, and all my defendants, not all, but the majority of my defendants are people of color. The judges are white people. Everyone that's in a position to make a decision about your life has very limited, if any, experience of what it's like to be you.
So we're not saying so much individual racism, though that exists. When we're talking about this topic of race, racism, and cultural competency, we're delving into more of the systemic racism that is already prevalent in our institutions. None of us put it there. We may not even be aware of it, but it just exists.
The way I see racism is colored kids are more likely to get locked up than, kids that are white, because they're more likely to get another chance. And just especially in the school system, I have seen so many, black girls that are locked up because they get into a fight with teachers. Because their whole demeanor, you know, they're aggressive, so like the teachers are more target on them. I'm on this project where we're talking about, you know, color girls in the school system, and now I started to see, it had opened my eyes to see how many girls I have come across that, you know, are locked up because they assaulted a teacher. And I think that goes back to the school system. We're not able to support them and able to give them the service they need, because there's a reason why that kid is assaulting the teacher. It's not because the teacher, it's because they had this anger in them. And where does that come from? It comes from somewhere at home.
And then a third objection that I hear and heard in a number of these responses that came, the 52 emails. What about those who are racist toward me? Well, isn't it possible then for a black person to be racist toward a white? And I would have to say no, because the white is in a dominant, privileged position, at least in this culture, over black. So it comes down to the whole rankism thing, that culturally there's a privilege to whiteness that makes it not possible. Somebody could be very prejudiced against me as a white person, but couldn't be racist against me. Just like a woman could not be a sexist toward me as a man. That doesn't seem fair, and certainly it isn't. But part of privilege is that it's something that I come with that I'm not aware of, and it doesn't enter into all the other realms of things I'm thinking about. For example, if driving over here today to do this filming, I was pulled over, I wouldn't wonder if I got pulled over because I'm white. Or geez, if I didn't get that job, it's probably because I was a man. That's just not going to be part of the conversation that has to go on in my head, because my whiteness, my maleness generally doesn't ever come up against me in this culture.
I got pulled over one time. I was like 14, and it was me. I'm in the back, my friend who's a Caucasian woman, 3 other black males. Cop came to the car and was just, everyone, like all the black dudes got pulled out. All of us got pulled out the car, searched. Like, I was like 14, like I'm getting searched, I'm getting harassed. Who are you, where you from? And the girl, nothing happened to her. Why is she not getting questioned? Why is she not getting searched?
I was taking a couple of guys driving in the community, teaching them how to drive, and they're both African-American young men, and I was in the car, and we were driving around, and all of a sudden 3 police cars pulled us over with lights on, and they looked very alarmed when they came to the door, and I thought, well, what have these guys done, you know? What did you guys do? And then when the officer saw me in there, he said, is everything okay? Well, yeah, I'm teaching them how to drive, and it was just a puzzling situation to me. And then they said, okay, just checking. And they left, and the guys in the car said, well, that happens all the time. You don't understand because you're white. And it was true. I didn't understand and wouldn't have understood if I hadn't had that experience. I need to walk alongside, I'm privileged to walk alongside people who have a different experience of life than me, who may not have the same privilege that is nothing to do with me. I didn't earn it, deserve it, didn't choose it. It just is what I came with. To see that things don't go the same for everybody and in this culture.
Working with youth, I see a lot more children of color who are locked up and a lot more white children being given better alternatives before they even reach the juvenile system. You know, when I was locked up, the punishments were different. I would run away or I would miss curfew and I would do all this time, but then there would be another white individual who would do something way worse than me and they'd be in there for a week. And so I noticed the differences in the treatment growing up in school and being locked up.
I remember one of the young men from our home going to a local employer looking for a job, and he just happened to be brought there by a young man who was white, was also in the home. And you know, it said help wanted and everything up there, and this is a big national chain. You'd recognize the name if I gave it. And he came up, the young man who was African American, and asked if they were hiring, and they told him no. We're not hiring at all at this time. And so he walked away just thinking nothing of it, but the young man who brought him was white, and he just thought that was kind of weird because it said hiring here, and he went up and asked the same question, and they said, oh, yes, we are. We're hiring during every shift. And when they came back and told me that, I had a hard time believing it. Really? Did that really happen? And I know that it did, but I had never seen it before. And unless I had the experience of being with someone firsthand who had seen it, I would question it. And so the last objection that I heard was, well, this seems just like political propaganda. And unfortunately, much of the conversation around race, racism, and cultural competency has become political. That's a real tragedy because certain words tap into, oh, you're one of those. And unfortunately, much of race conversation has become that. There are certain buzzwords that come and put us into camps, and then we discount everything said because, well, that's just a political stance that they're making. And it sets us way back around this critical topic, especially if we want to be effective juvenile justice ministers. And so what are the implications of this for the juvenile justice minister? Well, as we said, there's two parts to it. There's the individual and there's the systemic. And both are real and apply to me and the work that I feel called to do. The individual. So that requires that I just understand that I am white and I am male. And those things, because I don't think about them every day, I don't look in the mirror and say, boy, you're white today, or yeah, what a male you are. That's the definition of privilege. I don't see it. And yet people who aren't of the same white, male, sometimes middle class in a suburban culture, they're confronted with those realities throughout the day. It's in their face on a daily basis.
For most of our life, we kind of knew when we went into stores, you kind of felt, people kind of watch you when you go in. I remember, man, I don't know, we were probably 9, 10, me and my cousins walking by, cars kind of going to the corner store or whatever, and you'd hear the cars locked.
A second is to realize that that is a big deal to a lot of the kids that I work with who are locked up. When I come into a juvenile facility, particularly to lead a Bible study, I might think I'm just coming in neutral. Let's just open the Bible and go. But every young person who's there, consciously or subconsciously, is very aware of at least 3 things as soon as I walk in the door. 1, you're white, you're a male, and you're kind of fatherly looking. For most of them, that's like 3 strikes. Have not had good experience with white people, have generally been the ones who've been in authority over them, put them where they are. Not great experience with males, and not good experience with parent type roles. And so their amygdala is fully on alert. This is a danger. If I'm unaware of that, I don't really realize that I've got to connect with them. We talked about this in an earlier training. That happens in the limbic emotional brain. Connect with them so they can move from survival through the limbic brain into the prefrontal cortex where they can think about what they're thinking about, that they can learn and they can process information. My race gets in the way of that on a regular basis, especially if I'm not aware of it. Otherwise, we're going to do what we always do. We'll rely on historic distrust toward white, male, fatherly looking people. But it's not just individual when it comes to race and racism. There's a systemic nature to it, and nowhere is that more prevalent than the justice system, particularly for us, the juvenile justice system.
Systemic racism, mostly prevalent today, our criminal justice system. 2 out of 3 black males will end up doing some sort of jail time. And when I think about me being a black male and having 2 sons, there's like 2 of the 3 of my family, based on the statistics, would be doing some sort of jail time.
As a white person, if I commit some kind of crime out there or do something wrong or speed or whatever, I have a 1 in 17 chance of being arrested. If I'm Hispanic and do the same thing, I have a 1 in 7 chance of being arrested. And if I'm African American male, I have a 1 in 3 chance of being arrested doing the same thing. Now, that's a fact. So 40% of the population in prison is African American, though they're not committing that higher rate of crime than those of other races. And so the chance of being locked up for a non-white male in particular is 5 times greater than of a white male for doing the same thing. That is criminal. That's systemic racism. We call this juvenile justice ministry. And that word justice is a key one. What does it mean to do justice? Cornel West defined it that justice is what love looks like in public. Well, I want to thank you for staying in on this topic, which can be a difficult and challenging one, and for being a part of these trainings that we do through the Institute for Juvenile Justice Ministries. I invite you to come on to our website, ijjm.org, access other training that we have as well. And we are here to equip you to better minister to those who are in this juvenile justice system and have the privilege of going in and bringing the good news of Jesus Christ.